Well, to try to find out more about what Washington expects from Vladimir Putin, I'm joined first tonight by Sebastian Gorka. Born in Britain to Hungarian parents, he worked with Trump in the first administration, and today he's the president's senior director for counter-terrorism. Mr. Gorka, welcome to the show. We've heard an awful lot from President Trump about what Ukraine needs to do, a bit less about what Russia needs to do. If they don't agree to the proposed 30-day ceasefire, what do you think his reaction will be?
Well, I think you know what his reaction is going to be. It's going to be displeasure, and then he will take action. You just played a clip of the potential consequences, the very serious consequences for Russia if they don't want to see an end to the war. And that's a very realistic promise made by the commander-in-chief. Why? If you watch the whole of the Oval meeting today with the Irish Premier, the president was very clear and he was very emotional about the bloodshed, the thousands of young men, Russian and Ukrainian, who have been thrown into that meat grinder for the last 3+ years. And he wants one thing to happen now, and that's for the bloodshed to end. So I'm not going to steal the thunder from my boss or anyone else involved in the negotiations in Jeddah, but the fact is we are committed to one thing and one thing alone: to stop the horrific tragedy that is the conflict on your continent right now.
Because there is a contradiction, in a sense, between what Washington wants, what President Trump wants, or the order in which he wants things to happen. He wants a ceasefire and then a peace deal. The Russians are very clear they don't want to talk about a ceasefire until there is a wider peace deal, and that should include effectively neutralizing, defanging, and half-emptying Ukraine.
Well, I don't speak for what Moscow wants. I know the real world. I've been doing national security for a quarter of a century. You don't stop a conflict without a ceasefire first. You can't have peace underwritten by the warring parties until the bullets and the shells and the drones stop flying. So I don't know if you represent Russia. I don't. I know the history of warfare. You can't have the parties sit at a peaceful table in Geneva, Vienna, the Middle East, or elsewhere unless the bullets stop flying first. That is the precondition. It is the sine qua non.
Well, we all have to try to read what the Kremlin is thinking so far as we can. Is it your impression, forget the president, is it your impression that President Putin is ready for a peace deal? Actually wants one?
I look at the losses made. I look at the political tensions inside the Russian Federation, and it smacks very much. You're old enough to remember the Afghan-Soviet war. That did not go well for the Soviet Union. The first thing that was the crack, the chink in the armor of the Iron Curtain wasn't anything happening in Poland with Solidarność or in the land of my parents' birth in Hungary. It was when the mothers and the grandmothers saw the cardboard coffins of the 19-year-old privates being shipped back from Afghanistan and spoke out publicly against the Kremlin. So we're seeing echoes of that kind of tension domestically because it's the young men who are being thrown into the meat grinder.
I suppose one of the differences is that Putin seems to have a tighter grip on his country than the Russian leadership did back then, because there's been a lot of slaughter, a lot of bloodshed, and yet not the same kind of uprising of dissent around Russia that we can see. But let me ask you about the economics of all of this, because President Trump was pretty clear that the great weapon is the oil price. Do you agree?
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. If you look at the dynamics of the international, the global energy markets, absolutely. And beyond that, there are broader economic aspects to all of this piece. I gave an interview yesterday for BBC where they seem to think a piece of paper was more important than economic relations. I think those who remember Neville Chamberlain understand that a signed piece of paper is irrelevant. But if there is economic collaboration between America and the Ukraine, that's far more important for the peace of Europe than anything else. So whether it's the price of raw materials, rare earth minerals, gas and oil, or whether it's the intertwining of the global economy, these things are the secret to a lasting peace.
And again, I'm asking really for your impression, but we saw that very, very difficult meeting in the Oval Office between President Zelensky and President Trump. Is it your impression that things are now calmer, that the relations between America and Ukraine are relatively amicable now?
Oh, without a doubt. We've seen the apology come from Kyiv. We've seen their desire to come back to the negotiating table. So without a doubt, I think the wrong individuals were listened to on one side of the table 12 days ago. I think that has changed the dynamic. And it's just a recognition of empirical fact. There is no leader in the world today, not a nation head, not a prime minister, not a president, not a secretary general who can bring peace to Ukraine and to the European continent, except President Trump. That is the only person who can bring the fighting to an end. And I think that has been realized by Kyiv, as it has also by Moscow.
Well, we'll learn a lot more when Moscow gives its verdict, I'm sure. But Mr. Gorka, thank you very much for joining me tonight.